Hi, I'm Jess Fields. Welcome to the show. Perhaps more than any other event, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg last Friday at age 87 sent a shock wave through American politics that almost no one could have anticipated. No one except our very own guest, Dr. Ryan Burge, 2 months ago on this program. Dr. Burge is a political scientist at Eastern Illinois University and a pastor, and a frequent commentator and prognosticator on everything religion and politics in America. He's a very, very well-known statistician who looks through all of the data on where Americans are trending with regards to political opinions and religious affiliation and things like this. Well, he said on that program that the Black Swan event that really kept him up at night, that really concerned him, was the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. He explained on that program that it would be a major flashpoint in American politics, and so it is proving to be if you've been paying attention to the news of the last few days. So on Monday evening, I interviewed Dr. Burge. And I say that because Monday evening, and I'm releasing this podcast on Wednesday, so much has happened just in the last 24 to 48 hours that this story is constantly changing. But I still think that what Dr. Burge has to say is relevant, even if a little bit of it is dated. For example, Mitt Romney on Tuesday announced that he was going to support a vote for a Supreme Court nominee. There was a big question on Monday about whether or not that would occur. And now it does seem that Republicans have the votes to get the nominee through the Senate, which we weren't sure about on Monday. Still, I think you'll find Dr. Burge's analysis to be particularly interesting when it comes to how he breaks down the impact on the American electorate and American politics going forward. What precedent does this maybe set? And what could the House Democrats do to stop this nomination? That's probably the most interesting part of this, because I bet you have not considered that the House Democrats actually have a tool that they could stop the Supreme Court's nomination with. We all know that the Senate actually is the only body that approves Supreme Court nominees. But in fact, Dr. Burge points out there is an opportunity for House Democrats to maybe stop the nominee. Very interesting, and very interesting to see whether or not Speaker Nancy Pelosi will try the tactic that he talks about. But I don't want to give it all away. You will enjoy, regardless of your political opinion, I'm sure, this interview with quickly becoming a frequent guest. This is his third appearance, Dr. Ryan Burge of Eastern Illinois University. Joining me now is Dr. Ryan Burge. He is a professor of political science at Eastern Illinois University and a pastor in the American Baptist denomination. And this is the third time he's come on the program. Thank you, Dr. Burge, for coming on.
Third time's the charm, Jess. Glad to be with you.
So let's go and cut to what you talked about just a little over a month ago on this program.
So I'm going to be completely honest with you. The thing that keeps me up at night is Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying. Especially, let's say Biden wins the election, okay, in November, first week of November. Mm-hmm. She dies like around Thanksgiving, okay? Mm-hmm. Will the Republican Party try to cram through a Republican replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the lame duck session? To me, that runs a cold chill up my spine, because that is the kind of stuff that rips democracies apart.
So, Dr. Burge, you predicted that the one event that could shake up the election would really be this, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg would die. And in fact, on Friday, here is the lead from the New York Times obituary: Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the second woman to serve on the Supreme Court and a pioneering advocate for women's rights, who in her 9th decade became a much younger generation's unlikely cultural icon, died on Friday at her home in Washington. She was 87. So, Dr. Burge, a couple of appearances later, you've certainly proven yourself to be an accurate prognosticator of events. You said this is the Black Swan event. Mm-hmm. And tell us, what's your immediate reaction to this?
It's all over the board, to be honest with you. I mean, it seems like every time I open Twitter and scroll through a couple tweets and read what this person says, and that senator says this thing, and the next senator says a different thing, and then this commentator will say something, and I'll hear something from another commentator, and I sort of vacillate back and forth on thinking that we're in a very serious moment of precarity in American democracy at some minutes. And then sometimes my emotions will swing me back towards, wow, they actually might figure this thing out and come to some sort of compromise that makes no one happy, but keeps the country sort of together in some sort of weird mishmash that we're in right now. And that maybe we might survive this. But I mean, if anything, 2020's made me cynical about everybody.
Yeah, what a year this has been, right?
Yeah. It's just,
I mean, everything in one big moment. So let me ask you, I can't remember if you gave more specifics than in the clip I played there, or maybe we had talked about it offline. Obviously, you don't want to ever predict someone's death, but were you totally surprised by this, or did you think maybe this was coming? What do people in the political science academia community think about this? Was this something that was kind of expected?
I think we always are thinking about the bigger institutional questions about American democracy, and we're always looking for threats from all angles. What could tear this country apart? And really, if you talk to American politics scholars who are thinking a lot about the current moment that we're in, the macro issue is polarization, right? That is already fraying the edges of American democracy, because you've got people on the left thinking the people on the right are evil, and you've got people on the right thinking people on the left are evil, which sets us up in a kind of cosmic struggle for good and evil in American democracy, not just a policy preference for smaller government or larger government, but the side is the devil. That is the backdrop. So we're always thinking about what could continue to fray at the edges of American democracy. And in my mind, there were two things. One is the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg around the election time, right? Either before or directly after. My biggest worry was the lame duck, where Biden wins, the Senate flips, and they still cram somebody through in the lame duck. That's in some ways that's worse than this, but not by much. The other thing that I worry about is the Trump insistence on delegitimizing the electoral process in America. I think incredibly problematic, and I think this piece, the Ruth Bader Ginsburg piece, and the empty seat on the Supreme Court piece, actually plays into the other piece, because there's a decent possibility that some case around the election, there might be a Biden versus Trump Supreme Court case in December that would go to the Supreme Court, and then you'd have a 4-4 situation potentially, which could end up determining if Donald Trump gets 4 more years or if Joe Biden is the president. And I think that in this situation, half the country would think that the outcome was illegitimate, right or wrong, which is exactly what you don't want.
So let's go back in history to, and I'm old enough to remember Bush v. Gore. Not everybody listening to this might, but recap a little bit what happened in the 2000 presidential election.
Incredibly close race. Gore was the vice president under Clinton, was running, because that's kind of how things worked in those days. Bush was the governor of Texas, was pretty popular, considered to be like an evangelical Republican, pretty far to the right, but not too far to the right. And the thought was the country needed to change, because after 8 years of Clinton, we were exhausted from Lewinsky. The election was very close. Okay. And actually all of it came down, the Electoral College came down to Florida. Initially, the call was that Gore won. And then they pulled that back. The networks pulled that back and said, wait, we think it's too close to call. And it went on and drug on through the night. Well, eventually they came out in the middle of the night and said Bush had enough votes in Florida to win. And then it turned into a protracted legal struggle between Bush and Gore over something called a butterfly ballot, which is a ballot that was poorly designed on how to vote. And the way you did it was you took a little metal pencil and you pushed holes in that, like kind of knocked holes out of paper. They scanned that optically, and that's how your vote was counted. Well,
it was a really stupid design.
It was a stupid design. It really was a terrible design. Because what happened was
design,
old ladies couldn't push the paper all the way through with the metal stick. It kind of got dimpled or like hung off. They were called chads, is what they were called. And so there are pictures of election judges in Florida holding up these ballots to the light, trying to see what the intention of the voter was. And eventually what happens is the case goes to the Supreme Court, where Bush basically says, we have to stop counting. Okay, this is ridiculous. We need a president. We can't go through all this stuff. And Gore says, no, we have to keep counting. Now, ended up the Supreme Court voted 5-4 to stop the count and certify that Bush had won the election. Interesting postscript to that. Gore only challenged the ballots in certain counties in Florida. If all of those ballots would have been counted, Gore would have still lost Florida. However, if all the counties in Florida were recounted in a proper, thorough way, then Gore would have won Florida and therefore won the election. Now, the key moment, though, is after the Supreme Court goes 5-4 for Bush, Gore concedes, which is probably the most important moment of that time period, because he basically says, I'm going to legitimize this outcome by telling my people it's okay.
Yeah.
And we all sort of went, okay, how bad could it be? And then 9/11 happened, 18
Right.
years later.
No, yeah. I mean, 2001 was kind of like another 2020,
Yeah.
of 20 years ago. But I mean, it was the point you're making is important. I mean, the court was there. The
Mhm.
court made a decision. Conservatives ruled in favor of Bush,
Yep.
and liberals ruled in favor of Gore. I suppose it's
Correct.
not inevitable that that's how it would be, but that was how it turned out. And um, certainly a lot of legal arguments about why it was that way and so forth. And there's no reason to get into that now.
Yep.
But the court played an important role in that. That's why it's relevant to Ginsburg. And also relevant was that Gore at some point was willing to concede and to say,
Mhm.
hey, here we go. So now we are kind of in a another world in some respects, or at least it seems that way. Things are much more polarized.
Yeah.
And Ginsburg obviously was on the left side of the court. Roberts has, again, proven himself to be something like an Anthony Kennedy. So presumably, I think where you're going with this, Dr. Burge, is
Mhm.
in a close court case about the election, possibly that sixth vote that would be more a right-leaning vote would actually almost guarantee certain outcomes. Is that kind of where you're going
Yeah.
with that? Or?
Yeah. In a 4-4 tie, it's the lower courts, deciding the case at that point. It gets remanded to the lower court. So do we want some appeals court in Pennsylvania or Michigan making the decision on who the president of the United States is? At some point, we believe in democracy because we believe in it. We trust it being the best game in town. But when we see it being delegitimized, and I'll say this, I think Donald Trump, policy aside, the one thing to me that's the most dangerous is he consistently violates norms of democracy and he delegitimizes the process that we all agree on. And I think that is very destructive for where we are in our current time. He's already said that he might not respect the outcome of the election. That is, from a political science standpoint, that is terrifying.
Yeah, but you don't really think that Trump would question the election, do you? I mean,
Oh, I would 100% think he will. I think he'll declare himself a victor. So, okay, so here's you ready for Black Swan number 2? Here's my Black Swan number 2. Okay, so here's what we know. Republicans are wary of mail-in ballots and absentee ballots because Trump's poisoned the well against those consistently. So what we're going to see is in-person turnout is going to be heavy Trump. Mail-in turnout is going to be heavy Biden, I feel like. Okay. And so what's going to happen is if you count all the votes that were cast in person on election day, the early returns will lean towards Trump because those are Trump voters. However, in most states that allow mail-in balloting, that ballot can arrive up to 3 days after the election and still be counted. And so what might happen was the early ballots might come out and Trump sees the returns and goes, I'm the victor, so glad to have another 4 years, and has a big parade and celebrates. And then as the absentee and the mail-in ballots come in, all of a sudden his lead gets smaller and smaller in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida. And all of a sudden it goes from electoral victory for Trump to an electoral victory for Biden. And then Trump fights the whole thing from top to bottom. And now we have 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks of not knowing who the president is, and Trump not willing to back down and do what Gore did, which was be magnanimous and say, it's not about me, it's about our country, and let's move forward. I don't see Donald Trump doing that.
oh my goodness. All right. Well, we can talk about that, Black Swan, but let's get back on the track of Ginsburg because
Okay.
I do think that right now, when this podcast is being released, I mean, we don't know as of our recording this, and as far as I know when we release this, we don't know who is going to be the nominee. President Trump has stipulated that it's going to be a woman.
Mm-hmm.
He has said, I think I saw earlier today, he said there's 5 that are on the short list. On that list include Amy Coney Barrett, who is, I believe, is she a circuit court or an appellate court judge?
I think she's an appellate court judge,
But-
48 years old, Roman Catholic, 7 kids.
Very
Conservative
socially
jurist.
conservative is
Correct.
how she's generally seen. But yes, 7 children, and
Yep.
she is kind of the darling of a lot of conservatives. That she's going to be kind of the the most conservative justice. She also had a fairly tough confirmation compared to some of Trump's other appointees, being questioned over her previous like pro-life stances and some things like this. Another judge is Barbara Lagoa. I believe she is in Florida.
Correct.
She received 80 votes in the Senate and was appointed more easily. And also, I think President Trump is said to be considering her maybe because she's easier to get through and also might help with, Florida in the election and things like this. Several other names have come up. There's he mentioned specifically a 38-year-old justice, and I believe that is in, I want to say, the Carolinas.
Yes.
What is that judge's name?
I can't. Hold on. I'm gonna. I don't have it right now.
Anyway, there's 5, and so he's looking to pick a woman. I'll try to pull it here. Basically, he's trying to stick within the framework of replacing a woman with a woman, right? And this is also, I believe, what happened when Clarence Thomas was appointed, that he replaced Thurgood Marshall, I believe. Isn't that right?
That's correct. Yep.
So an African American with an African American, you don't lose the diversity of the court. So let's just kind of start from the very beginning. Why wouldn't Trump be able to get one of these nominees through? What would be the potential barriers that he would face in doing that?
So I think it's less about the candidate, the nominee, than it is about the situation that we're in. So here's where we are. It's 53-47, 53 Republicans in the Senate, 47 Democrats. We already have 2 on record who said they will not vote for a nominee before the election. And that is Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, conservative, and Susan Collins of Maine, kind of a moderate conservative, but in a very tough race in Maine, likely to lose, it seems like right now. So now we're at 51-49. Okay. I think it's safe to say that Mitt Romney will come out and join Murkowski and Collins. And the reason I say that is because he has nothing. I think so. He has nothing to lose. I mean, he already voted to remove President Trump. You know what I mean? Like, that's all. He's already gone that way. And he's already.
But you say Murkowski's conservative. I mean, she opposed the Kavanaugh nomination, and Collins supported it. Romney, I mean, certainly voted for impeachment, but traditionally was known as a more conservative, Republican. I mean, he wasn't known as being, let's say, as moderate as like John McCain. So
that's true. But I also think he's principled, though. He's principled. And I think that's the difference here. I don't think it's about the bona fides, the conservative bona fides of any of the candidates. I think that's immaterial to his decision. I think for him, he really is a guy who's going to be known for standing on principle, and he's going to really stand out in the history books for the impeachment choice, but also for this choice too. And I just think that, like, he has nothing to lose by doing this, because here's the thing. He won't be the deciding vote. Let's say he does decide to defect. So now it's 50-50. It's still, if it's 50-50, Pence votes in a tie and the nominee is confirmed. So he does not make the difference. Okay.
So just to hold on.
Yeah. Yep.
Hold on. Yep. So just explain why that is. What happens in the case of a 50-50 tie?
So it's a 50-50 tie. The vice president is the president of the Senate. That's really Mike Pence's only real responsibility in the Constitution. So a 50-50 tie, he will cast the tie-breaking vote, and obviously he's going to vote for the nominee and support President Trump. So you can't get 50-50. You have to get down to 49. Now, there's a weird wrinkle, okay, in this whole situation, and this is the wrinkle. The Senate race in Arizona between Martha McSally and Mark Kelly. Okay, Mark Kelly's Gabby Gifford's husband. He's an astronaut. Martha McSally lost a Senate race to Kirsten Sinema 2 years ago, and is probably going to lose again. Kelly's up like 9 points in the polls right now. But here's what's interesting about that. That Senate seat is a special election Senate seat. So whoever wins that seat will be seated on as early as November the 30th. Okay. So if Mark Kelly wins, he could be seated by the last day of November, not on January 3rd or January 5th or whatever inauguration day is. That's like a 5-week difference. So what could potentially happen? Murkowski and Collins both defect. Romney defects. It's 50-50. They're slowing down the progression. Okay. And if Kelly wins and takes that seat back, now it's not 50-50 anymore. It's 51 Democrats and 49
So
Republicans.
right now, Martha McSally
Mhm.
is serving in the Senate as a
Yes.
junior senator from Arizona.
Correct.
She was appointed to that
Yes.
position by the governor of Arizona.
Steve Ducey, yeah, because John Kyle retired
Right.
at the end of last year. Now, Martha McSally might be the worst politician in American politics because she might lose two
Doug,
Senate
it's by the way, it's Governor Doug Ducey because
Doug
Steve
Ducey.
Ducey's the guy from Fox and Friends.
Fox.
So.
That's right. I always mix that up.
Just
Yeah.
to be clear,
Governor Ducey. But Martha
Fox and
McSally
Friends guy is not the governor of Arizona.
No.
But,
he would probably like to be.
appointed. She was appointed.
Yeah, she was appointed.
And now she's the 50th vote, and you're saying that if
Yes.
she loses, which does look, frankly, likely if you're looking at the
Yes.
polls, Mark Kelly's very, very popular in Arizona.
Mhm.
After
Yep.
his wife, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, was shot, and he was an astronaut also.
Yep.
I mean, just a very, very popular figure.
Yep.
But if he wins that election, then he's going to sit at the end of November. So really, the timeline is compressed.
Yes, absolutely. The timeline to me is if they don't get it done by the end of November. Now, here's the thing. You can rush a nomination. You can rush a nomination in like 45 days if you really want to. You can run this thing quick if you really want to. However, what holds that up is a lot of these senators are not going to be in Washington, D.C. a whole lot in October because they're in pitched battles in their states. There's like 10 or 11 Senate seats that are in the balance right now that are close races, and they're all over the country, okay? In Colorado, in Maine, in Arizona, you can name all these seats, okay, where potentially the Republican could lose, the Republican incumbent could lose. So they're going to spend more time campaigning back home than they are going to be in Washington, D.C. doing a Senate confirmation hearing. So what can happen, and this is a possibility. Nancy Pelosi can bring up articles of impeachment against somebody in the Trump administration, okay, like Bill Barr. And there's a reasonable chance she does that. And here's why. Because under senatorial rules, impeachment articles take precedent over all other business in the Senate. So if
Really?
Yes.
So wait a minute. Nancy
Yes.
Pelosi holds this Trump card. Sorry for the
Yes.
pun.
Yeah.
She could just decide to draft impeachment articles and literally totally block the nomination.
Absolutely. Yes.
Why is this?
You're
I
right.
haven't seen this discussed anywhere.
It's way down. It's like way down in parliamentary procedure. But that's the way the procedure works. That impeachment always takes precedent over everything else because it should, because it's like it's the nation on trial, basically, right? So they could run impeachment articles against Bill Barr. They could run another impeachment article against Donald Trump if they wanted to on a totally different, I don't even know what they charge them with, but whatever. They can make it up. But you know what? The House is majority Democrat, so they can run, so they can keep running these articles of impeachment as a way to gum up the works. So here's the bigger thing, and this is what I want to make clear to everyone listening. American democracy runs on norms more than it runs on rules, okay? The rules in our system are very scant. They're very sparse. And the way that we get legislating done in this country is by everyone going, hey, if you're cool, I'll be cool. If you do the right thing, I'll do the right thing. And that's worked for a long time. For over 200 years, our democracies basically function most of the time. However, we are in a situation now where I think that the majority of the country believes that the Republicans are violating norms in a way that are over and above what is acceptable. I don't think that's a partisan position, by the way. I mean, Lindsey Graham even said it. I'm not going to, I won't vote for a nominee in an election year. He said, well, hold it against me. Well, I'm going to hold it against you, bud. You're doing exactly what you said you wouldn't do. Okay. And you know what? That's okay. What's his name? Matt Walsh on Twitter today said, you know what? Republicans have the power, so they should do whatever the hell they want. And you know what? I 100% agree with that. But I also understand that norms say, if you do this, then I'm going to do that. And so if you want to rush this nominee, Nancy Pelosi is going to run impeachment articles down your throat to try to stop the process. Are both of them bad? Yes. But that's where we are.
So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about precedent, because everyone's now talking about 2016, and certainly those, we should say, those that oppose the replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg prior to the election are bringing up, of course, the 2016 situation with Antonin Scalia and the replacement of that seat. Could you talk a little bit about what happened with the Scalia nomination and all that?
So Scalia was probably the most conservative jurist we had at the time. Him and Clarence Thomas were really neck and neck for being far to the right. Scalia was a guy who was a little bit older, but died pretty unexpectedly at a ranch in Texas, I believe, in February of 2016. So 9 months before the election. And the Senate was majority Republican. Obama was the president. And he chose a guy named Merrick Garland to be the nominee. Merrick Garland is considered to be a little bit to the left of center, but definitely not like a Ruth Bader Ginsburg style. Like definitely a strong Democrat, but not a very, very liberal Democrat. Kind of seen as a consensus pick, by the way, by people who watch the court and are nonpartisan. Mitch McConnell says point blank, we're not going to even hear the nomination. We're not going to hold confirmation hearings. We're in an election year, and we want the people to decide who the president's going to be. So essentially, the Supreme Court sat one seat empty for almost a year, actually over a year, while they had the election and Trump won. And you know what? That sort of sets the precedent. Now, the difference here is that in that situation, the president was a Democrat and the Senate was majority Republican.
Right.
Now, the president's a Republican and the Senate's majority Republican. So there's really nothing stopping the Senate from doing this thing.
Yeah, why isn't that a different situation? I mean, that is pretty much what Republicans are saying is that, look, this is totally different because now Trump and the Senate, I mean, it's all Republicans. So this is a very, very different situation than 2016. Is that not true?
I think the time period's what's the difference. I mean, there are people casting ballots right now. Early voting started in Virginia over the weekend. We are voting for who the president's going to be. And the country is making its mind up about who should get to appoint Supreme Court justices. I think it's, again, this is not about rules. This is about norms. And I think objectively, when you look at democracy, you have to say, so if Trump picks this 38-year-old Russian, that's her name, Allison Rushing's her name.
Okay. Yes.
38 years old, she could potentially be on the court for 5 decades. Okay. 5 decades, because Ruth Bader Ginsburg, 87 when she died. Okay. At least years, this person might be a jurist at the highest court in the land, owning some of the most important power that we have in our country for 40 or 45 years. The American public should have a chance to vote. And you know what? If Trump wins re-election, go ahead. You know what I mean? Like run the nominee, appoint the nominee, do 6-3, because that's what America wants. Okay. But at least let America decide. You don't have to wait that long. I think it's way worse to wait 9 months than it is to wait 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And I think that's what the Democrats are saying here. You just need to wait a little bit. Wait till the election. And if you win, run the nominee.
I hate to ask this question because it's the kind of question I don't like to ask when I do this program. But I'm going to ask it.
Yeah.
Would the Democrats not do the same thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely they would. But that's the problem is, so there's this theory in international relations called realism, which basically says that power is the only thing that matters. If you want peace, prepare for war, right? And you do evil to people or meanness to people because you can. And then if you're being, that meanness is being done to you, you figure out a way to not let that meanness happen to you. And that in our system is by winning elections, right? So from a pure power standpoint, I think the Democrats would have done the same thing? I think they probably should have. They would have. Should they have? I don't think so. And I don't think the Republicans do it in this case. And I don't think the Democrats should have done it if the roles were reversed. And you know what? I think I talk about this all the time with my students. I think we're in a problem in America when there's no adults in the room. Adults mean I care more about the goodness of my country than I do about the goodness of my party, right? And right is right. Right is right. And this is something we haven't talked about yet. Beyond the Nancy Pelosi impeachment threat, which is a real threat, there are way bigger threats looming on January the 5th after Biden, let's say Biden does win. The polls don't look like he's leading right now. And maybe the backlash against a quick confirmation actually might sink a lot of the senators who voted for her on the Republican side. So now the Senate flips to Democrats. The president becomes a Democrat. And you know what's really terrible? When you do something bad to somebody else and then they get the power. Because they could very easily do many worse things back to the Republicans, like admitting the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico as states. They could do things like ending the filibuster. Right now, it's 60 votes to get anything passed in the Senate. They could knock it down to 51 votes. They could pack the court with additional.
Okay, you said it. Pack the court.
And there it is.
Now we got to talk about it because obviously, any student of American history, God willing, they're still learning American history. We'll learn that after Franklin Delano Roosevelt failed to get so many of his New Deal reforms through, a court that largely at the time, people do not know this now, but I had a wonderful professor of Supreme Court rulings who the whole class was about that. And he explained in minute detail that, until not even 100 years ago, the Bill of Rights was not incorporated. The 14th Amendment, these were not incorporated. People do not understand now, I think, that once upon a time, the federal Constitution was seen as just governing the federal government. The states had their own thing. And so it was a totally different view of how government worked. So FDR kind of ran into this on the economic side of things and basically threatened to pack the court. I mean, what happened, Dr. Burge?
So FDR said, we have all these New Deal programs, WBA, CCC, AA, all those things. Congress basically gave him a blank check, by the way. The Democrats said, whatever you want to do, man. They actually passed the Bank Holiday Act without the bill actually being written. They said, we trust you, you're fine. Yes, the idea. That's how much trust that Congress had in FDR. It gets to the courts, and the courts keep striking down a lot of pieces of the New Deal. Well, FDR says, listen, guys, here's your option. Change your mind, or I'm going to add 6 justices. He wanted to go from 9 to 15. And there's the famous phrase, the switch in time that saved 9. Justices switch their positions in order to keep the court at 9 by changing their positions on some of the FDR New Deal policies to allow them to proceed, which kept us at the 9 justices we have right now, which is not any sort of magic number, by the way. It's not enshrined in the Constitution. We have 9 justices. That's just by custom. So adding more justices is not illegal or unconstitutional in any way. It's just what we've always done, or at least for over 100 years now.
So this is why you're saying that we're really a country governed by norms.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very much a country. We just do so the Senate is run on unanimous consent, which means that every senator has the opportunity to block any piece of legislation at any time for any reason. They have these what are called secret holds, where they basically can hold up a bill for no reason at all. And they don't have to release their names. Could do this on every single bill ever brought up in the Senate, but they don't, because they realize the norms are we need to pass something, right?
But that is to be fair, that's a rule. That's not constitutional.
It is, but it's not a constitutional rule. It's a parliamentary rule, which can be overturned by the next sitting senators when the election's over. So they can change all the rules they wanted now.
This was some years ago. There was a big discussion. I don't know, maybe it was over a decade ago now, about the nuclear option, and it took. Go through that, Dr. Burge. What happened with that rule? Because that also would have affected Supreme Court nominees at one point, correct?
Yeah, it would have. So the filibuster is what has been part of parliamentary procedure for a long time. Okay, which means that any senator can basically stop senators from voting. So it takes 60 votes in the Senate to do what's called cloture, which is stopping a filibuster. Now, a lot of people think that filibusters are where you stand up and talk, but more often than what they are threatened filibusters, not actual filibusters. So let's say right now it's 53-47, okay? Let's say there's a bill that the Republicans want to run in the Senate the Democrats don't like. They can threaten the filibuster knowing that the Republicans cannot muster 60 votes because they only have 53 to overcome that filibuster, when really it only takes 51 votes to pass the piece of legislation. Okay, so really the threshold to vote is not 51, it is 60 to get to cloture. And
so why does that not apply in this situation?
Okay, so there are certain cases where the nuclear option was where Harry Reid, who was a Senate Majority Leader before Mitch McConnell, back during the Obama years, basically pulled the plug on the filibuster for judicial nominations.
Democrat from Nevada, very powerful in his time, very, very well known.
Sort of the counterbalance to Mitch McConnell in a lot of ways. Not really flamboyant or, boisterous, just a real calm kind of guy like Mitch McConnell is. And moved that threshold down from 60 to a majority, to 51. So now it only takes 51 votes to confirm judicial nominees, which means the filibuster doesn't apply in this situation. So that's called the nuclear option, because it really meant that we're going back on years of tradition about how the Senate works. And we want the Senate to be overwhelmingly in favor of something for it to go forward, not just 50+1.
So was that like the first time in history of the Senate that nuclear option had been used, or what was because it would seem like if you were a Republican strategist, you could just go out there and say, look, guys, this is all because Harry Reid set this precedent, years ago or something like that. I don't know. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's basically both sides. I mean, it's easy, of course, for somebody that opposes what Trump's doing, replacing RBG, to go
Hmm.
and say, well, look at 2016. But you could go back farther and say, well, look at Harry Reid. And I'm sure if you kept going back, you could find both parties throwing the ball back and forth, right?
Oh, for sure. And there's all kinds of rules that go back to like how powerful the majority leader is in terms of running bills and things like that. That go way into the weeds of how the Congress works. But the problem is we call this tit for tat in foreign policy. Like you like bomb a little base here, and I bomb a bigger base, then a bigger base, then a bigger base, then a bigger. It goes back and forth, right? The problem is tit for tats never end well for either party.
Mm.
So if Trump and the Republicans run this nominee and confirm this nominee, the tat then is adding 2 states, eliminating the filibuster, packing the courts, right? And then when the Republicans get power back, they're going to counter by doing even more, maybe adding 5 more justices, then 10 more justices, and then where does it end, right? Here's how I think about this. There's a grenade sitting in American democracy right now that the pin has been pulled out of with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Okay, and it's sitting there, could explode at any moment and really shred us apart. There are literally 4 people in America that are capable of putting that pin back in that grenade and saying, let's have this fight in 8 weeks. Let's have it in 10 weeks. And like I said, if Trump wins, there's nothing the Democrats can do anyway. Run it, run the nominee. But I think that to me is the compromise they have to arrive at. If Trump wins re-election, then we'll run the nominee and that'll be it. But right now, we don't know that for sure. And it doesn't look like Trump's going to win re-election. So you got to wait, I think.
Well, I mean, so what is the political impact of this decision? Is it good for Trump and the base, bad for Trump and his base if they
Oh,
rush this now? I mean, it almost seems like if it were on hold, that would energize Republicans, but seems like this current move is also energizing Republicans and it's energizing Democrats. I mean, it's perhaps hard to say, right, who really is being more energized by this right now.
so here's what I think. I think if Trump comes out and says, "Here's what it is, guys. I need you to reelect me, and then we're going to run this nominee," that actually might help him and the senators down ballot. I think if he confirms someone before the election, it's like that's the last gasp of a party that's going to lose, trying to do whatever it can with the power that it still has. I think in some ways that makes it even harder for people like Gardner in Colorado to win re-election or Collins in Maine to win re-election. I think both those lose. I think Mark McSally loses too, because it basically looks like a desperate plea for a party where the window is closing on them and they're trying to cram as much stuff through the window while it's still open. And I think that's the reality. So they have to decide. And if Trump was somebody else, like a typical politician, a tactician, I would say, is me losing a second term worth 40 years in the Supreme Court? Is that a trade that I'm willing to make? I think a lot of politicians, a lot of presidents would say absolutely, because the conservatives will look at me in 20 years and go, oh, President Trump took one for the team on this. We got what we wanted, and we still have what we wanted because it's 6-3 and will be for a long time. I think that's a trade that other politicians would make. I don't think Trump thinks like that because he just doesn't think strategically. He just thinks about himself and winning re-election. But I do think that's something to consider. I think in the current environment, I think this favors the Democrats. I think this energizes a lot of people who are like, I don't care much about politics. Now they're like, oh, wait, 6-3 Supreme Court, abortion, ACA, all these other things that are coming up, labor and this kind of thing. Like these are big issues that one justice can make all the difference in the court. And I think it energizes sort of moderately attached Democrats or people who are sort of more principled Republicans who are moderates as well, saying, I don't like what this Republican Party's doing. I don't see how it really galvanizes Republicans more than it galvanizes Democrats in the current environment, at least.
Well, I mean, certainly if they get someone through right before the election, then I suppose that really could depress Republican turnout because then what's the
Yep.
point of turning out? You've already gotten the. I mean, isn't it true though, Dr. Burge, that at least from some things I've read, the Supreme Court as an issue seems to be more of a conservative issue really than a liberal issue overall.
Yep. So I've done some analysis looking at the question, how much confidence you have in the Supreme Court over time, like over the last 30 years. And for Democrats, that support has gone down really slowly over time. But for Republicans, I think this is super interesting. Their support of the Supreme Court, their confidence in the Supreme Court is very much dependent on who's in the White House. For instance, it was very high when Bush was in the White House, dropped significantly when Obama was in the White House, and then jumped back up when Trump was elected. So I think a lot of conservatives see the Supreme Court as really where the battles are going to be fought over things like Roe, for instance, and the ACA. And
Does that go back to the evangelical infusion
Yep.
into the party of the late
Yep.
80s, early 90s? Or
Yep. It all goes back to Roe. I mean, this is where the Supreme Court really was not a thing that people talked about until Roe and until the evangelical Christian right and the Catholic right, by the way, kind of melded together on the issue of abortion and really started talking about Roe as being the thing, the totem for all of abortion politics to really center around Roe. Interestingly enough, by the way, Ruth Bader Ginsburg opposed the decision making in Roe. She said it numerous times. She thought the court went too far by trying to
really?
create our framework. Yeah. She goes, that was too much. The court should not make these big, large, pronounced. That was the Warren court, by the way, a progressive court trying to rechange America. She thought they should just rule on the merits of the Texas law, which is very restrictive, instead of trying to make this whole framework that applied to all 50 states, just strike down the laws in the state of Texas alone and then go on to the next thing. Interesting little side note there.
Very interesting. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whether someone agrees with her or not, clearly was an extraordinarily intelligent lady who contributed a tremendous deal, at least socially, to the position of women in America. That's pretty hard to deny that. I was watching the documentary the other day, the RBG documentary, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's very interesting. And she had a great, long marriage to, the same guy. I mean, and she was a family person. And so, I mean, it certainly is true that in terms of how polarized we are, we've come a long way. I saw some things that were lauding her almost saint-like, and then I saw some things on the other side that were attacking her with really vicious language. I mean, just vicious language. But I saw the same thing when Antonin Scalia died, honestly.
For sure.
Too. I mean, do you think that there's a way to heal the country after the next few months, or are we moving towards a broadening of what is already a certain amount of civil conflict and high degree of polarization? And is it just going to get worse and worse and more extreme?
So I was talking to my wife about this last night. I was thinking about this moment, right? In 2008 with McCain and Obama. Okay. There's this famous moment for you younger people who weren't, aware of politics in 2008. There was a rumor going around that Obama was a Muslim, a terrorist, not born in America. Right. And Donald Trump, by the way, pushed this theory pretty hard. I want everyone to remember that. So there was a town hall meeting where a woman stood up in a McCain rally and she said, I don't trust Obama. I think he's a Muslim. I don't trust him. And McCain cut her off and said, no, listen, Obama is a good man. He's a family man. We just disagree with it on some certain policies, but he's a good man. He saw the crazy and he tamped it down. Okay. He willingly jumped on that grenade and said, we're not going to make this race about what color of skin my opponent is or his potential background. Okay. We're going to talk about the issues. Donald Trump would go, you're darn right he was born in Kenya and he's not an American. I think he's a Muslim too. I think that kind of statesmanship is what this country needs. So, and I listen, McCain was a Republican, right? And a rightish Republican on some issues too. But McCain understood that this country is better off when we do not encourage the fringe on both sides. And I worry that this moment is encouraging the fringe on both sides and not being tamped down. I think there's a way forward. And I think the way forward is for a group of senators, both Democrats and Republicans, moderates on both sides, coming together and saying, here's a list of 5 nominees that we can all agree on, our side and their side. If the nominee is not on this list, we will not vote yes. Okay? And that way, it gives Trump the option to pick one of these people that might be a compromise choice and move forward that way, or he can decide to burn it all down. I think we're going to be better off. Listen, I don't want to, I'm not anti-Republican, okay? I think there's a lot to like about conservatives in American politics. I'm anti-Trump because Trump doesn't respect the norms that hold our country together, and Trump cares about winning, okay? He's not the guy we need at a time like this because he does not tamp down the fire. He pours gasoline on the fire constantly. I hope that the Republican Party's next nominee is a McCain type. a guy who moves back to the middle, who tries to reconcile all of us. But I don't feel hopeful right now because I think the cat's out of the bag in a lot of ways. And that part of the party's gotten strong and loud and amplified because of social media. And I just don't see, and by the way, the liberals are too. Like Twitter's awful. Like woke Twitter is in some ways worse than like the alt-right Twitter. So both sides have gotten so angry and so dogmatic that they are never going to compromise. It's the rest of us who have to figure out a way to say, yeah, guess what? I'm going to vote for that guy, even though I don't agree with him. And I don't know if we're there right now. We have to get through this moment. If we get through this moment and the country doesn't fall apart, I'm hopeful, but I'm not hopeful we can get through this moment.
Well, I think some of the reason why certain people listening to this podcast may find problem in what you're saying and may say that you're anti-Republican, Dr. Burge, is
I'm really not.
But you can understand because right now it does seem that the party is focused on President Trump. I mean, the Republican Party is, has changed its public positions in a lot of ways. On things like trade and foreign policy is certainly has
and immigration for sure.
Immigration to some extent. Yeah. So of course, I mean, it was only a few years before that George W. Bush was pursuing quite a different policy on immigration. So I mean, I think that maybe is something that you can understand to some extent, but that always happens with parties, right? I mean, the leader of the party, the president, surely that happened with Obama to some extent as well, and George W. Bush. Yeah. But what you're saying though is that we're just at a, if I can try to charitably reframe it so that it catches everyone, you're saying we're at a time where it's so hot on both sides.
For sure.
There really is no, I mean, but so how could you possibly find Supreme Court nominees everybody could agree on? I mean, it seems like the days of having 100 votes for somebody, those are gone.
Yeah, that's the good old days. That's what I think. I don't know if you can find 5 candidates that would fit the mold where they would get votes from the far left and the far right, right? Maybe you don't even shoot for those people. Maybe you shoot for the middle, getting 60, 55 votes, something like that. Maybe that's what you shoot for.
It's an interesting idea. I wonder if anybody would go for it, honestly. I mean,
well, if they did, my confidence in American democracy would skyrocket overnight. And I would go, man, maybe we can actually get through this. But here's what I worry about. Lamar Alexander came out and said, run the nominee. ChuckGrassley came out and said, run the nominee, right? 2 guys who have been there forever and are elder statesmen.
They were supposedly, I mean, just a couple of days ago, they were mentioned as people that might oppose this. That's why you and I waited to do the interview until now. It's Monday night because we didn't know who was going to come out, and
and it really shocked me. I mean, Chuck Grassley's 87 years old, for goodness sakes. Dude, what does he have to? I mean, it sounds terrible. He has no life after the Senate. When he retires, that's it. He's going to go off to his farm and retire. He doesn't care. He doesn't have to have a life in Republican politics. So that makes me think that he must really not like the Democrats, or he's been really convinced by the Republicans to do this. When I think 30 years ago, Chuck Grassley would not have done this. I don't think Lamar Alexander would have done this 30 years ago. I just wish there were more statesmen on both sides. I wish there were more statesmen on both sides.
Well, can you? All right. So who do you think is a statesman right now? In
Romney. That's it. I really do. I have more respect for Mitt Romney now than I had 8 years ago. I think that he's become what I wish the Republican Party.
But that he's very unpopular in the Republican Party. I mean,
which is what that's sad though. That's sad to me because he should be incredibly popular amongst everybody because he's a guy. McCain was largely popular because he was a maverick. He voted to keep the ACA at one point, and the Republicans hated him for it. I think in a time where it's easy to play for your team and support your team, a person who has the courage of their convictions to vote against their team is someone that we should all stand up for. And I don't think there's enough of them. I don't think there's any Democrats right now that I can go, yeah, I really think they're, terrific. I think they would be willing to look at both sides. I know Romney's done it. He went to a Black Lives Matter protest. And when he was asked why he was there, he goes, because Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, whoa, it's such a principled position that I love. And he voted for impeachment. So I think Romney's my guy. And if you watch that documentary Mitt on Netflix about his campaign in 2008, 2012, he comes across as such a great human being. He just couldn't bring that.
Interesting. I've seen that. That is an interesting documentary.
It really is.
His family is very endearing in that too.
For sure. He's a good guy.
He certainly is a committed father and husband. I mean, but it seems that maybe, let's say that this the fantasy world of having all these statesmen, as you define it,
Yeah,
exist, let's say out there somewhere. I don't know that the political calculus exists for those people to get elected anymore, Dr. Burge. Is that
I
true?
agree. I agree. I
Okay.
agree. And that's the problem is the incentive structure in Congress today is dive to the edges. Be as fringy as you can. Appeal to the far right and the far left. Don't try to seek compromise. And, there's no room for moderates anymore. The middle the middle is not where you want to be. And listen, Joe Biden used to be pretty moderate. If you look back at his voting record, especially, dude was, left of center, but not far left of center. The problem is that polarization, and listen, I don't have the solution to polarization. One solution is what you just talked about. Get off social media, for God's sakes. Oh my goodness. Like, it just feeds your brain rot over and over and over again. And I think the reality is that most people now can customize their news to reinforce their prior understanding of the world and never
Right.
be challenged. And I think that's the problem, is that people are not willing to be challenged on ideas on the other side. Listen, the Republicans are not evil, and neither are the Democrats. And I know there are big people online are going to yell at me for saying that, but it's the reality. It's the reality that we live in right now, that both sides aren't terrible. Here's what's funny. So I wrote a piece for Christianity Today yesterday, posted last night. I got about 40 comments that said, I don't know how you can be a Christian and vote for blank. And I swear to you, I could not figure out what that next word was going to be in half the time. Because half the time it said Trump and half the time it said Biden.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But that shows you where we are, though. It's not like, oh, good Christians disagree. It's no. If you vote for the other party, you are evil, my friend. You are a baby killer, or you are, wanting to separate kids from their parents on the border. And
I saw a lady tweet the other day that she was planning on leaving her husband because he was supporting Donald Trump.
yeah, I know. And
mean-
there's actually polling data about people don't want their kids marrying someone of the other party now. And it's a significant number, like 30 or 40% of both parties.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot. And you know what? That just drives polarization.
I'm sorry to laugh. I just,
It's sad. It makes me sad, though.
that's I don't know. I can understand. I suppose people maybe, to be fair to somebody that says that, if you associate a totally different view of the world and value system with the other party, maybe that would explain some of that, right?
Sure. And I think that the problem is, though, that partisanship and politics has become religion for most Americans today. That I grew up at a time when I grew up during the religious right, the 1990s, where I was taught that religion should guide everything I do, say, think, vote, and everything else, right? That religion should be my first paradigm that I see the world with. And it seems like that religion, it used to be we looked at politics through a religious lens, and now we switch those lenses now. And that politics is the first lens, and everything is downstream of that, including religion. And I think that is poisonous. I think that is terrible for Christianity, which I'm a pastor of, and I talk to my congregation about all the time. But it's also bad for politics because it makes politics take on this gravity that I think it doesn't deserve sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes it doesn't deserve that. So,
well, if anybody wants to know more about that, who's listening to this, we covered that. And I think both of the last two programs, actually, that we did, where you talked about how religion is now in some households, perhaps an element almost of politics, which is subservient to political view. Let me ask you about these black swans you brought up earlier. Okay, so let's go to black swan number one, which you brought up, and then I'm going to throw another one at you that I thought of. So you were talking about basically a situation where President Trump and Vice President Biden are arguing over the election results because of the delay in mail-in balloting. Kind of go through and let's talk about realistically how that might unfold.
Oh man, this whole mail-in balloting thing is turning into a straight up debacle. In Pennsylvania, they're saying that maybe 30 or 40,000 ballots might be tossed because they're called naked ballots. They're not actually wrapped in the envelope they need to be wrapped in to be sent back for counting. So they can't be counted. They're naked envelopes, naked ballots. 30 to 40,000 just in Philadelphia. So it might be 100,000 in the entire state, which might be enough to swing the election. So all these issues are going to be litigated in the courts after the fact. And if the Supreme Court is 4-4, or only has 8 justices, let's say, it might be 4-4. That's a bad situation because what you actually might have is you might have lower courts in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Florida, Wisconsin, Arizona, all arguing these cases at one time, kind of winding their way through. No one keeps up with all this stuff. The average person doesn't care that much. They just want to know who the winner is. And the reality is we might not know who the winner is. We might not know who the winner is even on Inauguration Day, which would be, like, what do we even do in that
Is
situation?
there precedent for that?
No, there's not. That's the sad part is we don't know what. So there's these things that happen that people don't realize. Let's say Biden wins, okay? Let's say he wins it's clear cut. He wins in a bunch of states, huge electoral victory, whatever. Let's say he dies on Christmas Day. Who becomes president of the United States? Constitution doesn't say. We don't know what to do in that situation. And I'm not joking. Like, you can read about this. There is no constitutional remedy to that situation in the current Constitution. So, there are so many things that can happen that we need to have some clarity on. And it seems like with COVID and mail-in ballots and then the Supreme Court and everything else, the situation is getting muddier and muddier and muddier. The one thing I'll say to anybody who's listening is, if you think this election is going to be decided on November 3rd, by the time you go to bed, you are sorely mistaken. It might take, at best.
Would you bet on that?
I would, unless it's a landslide for Biden. You will not know when you go to bed on November 3rd who the president is in January. You won't know.
You're betting on that. You
I think
put
so.
$5 on it.
I'll put $5 on that. Yeah. I think the reality is if Biden does get the 6 or 7 point victory, nationwide that the pollers are saying he's at right now, I think we'll know by that Friday after the Tuesday, because that's when all the ballots have to be in and most of them will be counted by that day. So I think the reality is by Friday, I think that's November 6th probably, we'll probably know who the president is. But if it's close in certain key states, Clinton lost by between 1 and 1.2% in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Florida last year. 1,000 votes was the difference in the election. So that's the kind of that I hope for the good of democracy that whoever wins by a bunch. It can't be close, because that would create a panic and havoc that we've never seen in this country. So I think best case scenario is Biden wins by 10, and we know on November 3rd. I think the reality is he probably wins by 6, and we don't know until the end of the week.
So let's say that it's close for either President Trump or Vice President Biden, and that it's a couple of points. Clinton, I think, won the popular vote by 2 percentage points or something?
Three
3 percentage points. But
yeah.
it came down to these states, these traditionally Democratic states that flipped to President Trump. So, in terms of some of these states in this issue, like in Pennsylvania, where I think President Trump won by, 60, 70,000 votes, something like that.
Yep.
You're talking about a small number of votes.
Yep.
So if he comes out ahead, based on the initial read of some of these states or whatever, and let's say everything's litigated, let's say he wins, or let's say Biden very slightly, and it's like 1 or 2 states. How realistic is it that those lawsuits would end up not mattering anyway? I guess what I'm trying to say is there a situation where even if it's close, everybody would kind of agree that you really couldn't litigate it because of this or that issue? Or basically, can you just sue for any reason?
So you can sue for any reason, but
right? That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
But I think the reality is, and here's what I would hope would happen, hope with my fingers crossed, is the Republican Party establishment puts pressure on Trump upwards and says, dude, stop, give up. It's clear that you've lost. Stop fighting. You need to concede the election and let's move on. Now, if Trump would actually do that is a question that I think is in some doubt more than it would be for another candidate. I think that's objectively true. But I do think the Republican Party in that scenario realizes the stakes of the game and it would be establishment pressure bottom up from like the senators and the members of the House up towards him, as opposed to for him making that decision autonomously from everybody else. I think that is the most likely outcome. I like the whole idea, will Trump actually leave the White House if he loses? I think he will, because the rest of the party is going to abandon him like they did with Watergate and Nixon. That was a thing that made Nixon resign, because he realized he lost the support of the rank and file. The Republicans need to back that idea up and say, listen, if it's clear that Biden won and, he's up by 100,000 votes in the 4 states that he needs, we're not going to fight this. It's over, and put that pressure on Trump. And then hopefully he would say, okay, I give up. and we would move on, hopefully.
But what, I mean, wouldn't Biden do the same
Of
thing potentially?
course.
I mean, challenge. I mean, so really, if both sides are going to challenge, then you're going to end up with, unless it is a landslide, a protracted result. Is kind of your point here.
I think that Biden's threshold for giving up would be a lot lower than Trump's threshold for giving up. And I think that's just clear by how Trump has constantly violated the norms and said things completely false about electoral results. He fought the mail-in ballot system in Pennsylvania and went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court basically said, you need to give us evidence that these ballots are fraudulent. He brought no evidence. So he's basically making things up. I mean, that's not my opinion. That's what the court said. So, that to me doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the fact that he has a strong grasp on I don't think he understands how much his words matter as much as other presidents of both parties have understood that their words matter and their actions matter. And they need to think about democracy more than they think about themselves. I think that Biden would fight to an extent that would be lower than Donald Trump. And I think Bush or Mitt Romney would have fought at the same level that Biden would have fought, but then realizing it's a losing battle and then walking away for the good of the country, saying, I put up a fight and now it's over. I don't think Trump knows where that threshold is.
Let me ask you about my black swan that I've thought of.
Oh boy. Okay.
I don't even know how I got on this idea of thinking of this, but I think I was reading an article about the 2016 election.
Mm-hmm.
So many Americans, of course, are not even aware of how the Electoral College works, but every state has a set number of Electoral College votes.
House members plus senators.
House members plus senators, yes.
That's it. Yep.
However, those electors are not determined by some process within the state governments. They are determined by the parties.
That's correct.
Respectively.
Yes.
And so if you go to the Democratic Party convention or the Republican Party convention in a given state, your party is going to then have within congressional districts, I think is almost generally always how it's done everywhere, unless you're in like a state like Wyoming where there's just one, but you're going to, well, actually there'd be three, I suppose, three elections. But the parties are going to determine the electors, and these are people that are just like party faithful. Sometimes they're elected officials, sometimes there's not. I don't think there's any particular rules.
Yep.
And so where it gets interesting to me is that most states don't have laws requiring those electors when they go to the Electoral College in December or whenever to cast their ballots. Most states don't actually bind their electors with any particular consequences. So in the 2016 election, I'm getting to the end of this question, I promise, but in the 2016 election, there were, I believe, an attempt for as many as 10 faithless electors. And because of state laws, only 7 ended up counting in the Electoral College. But they did. And in Washington state alone, there were, I believe, 5? Yes, 4. There were 4 in Washington. They were pledged to Clinton, Kane. 3 of those voted for Colin Powell, and 1 voted for Faith Spotted Eagle, who's a Native American activist. In Texas, there were 2 that were pledged to Trump Pence. 1 voted for John Kasich, the other voted for Ron Paul. And in Hawaii, there was an elector pledged to Clinton Kane who voted for Bernie Sanders. So this actually changed the result of the election. I mean, it didn't change like who was elected, but like if you go back and actually look at the electoral result, those faithless electors are counted in there, Dr. Burge.
So listen, I actually was going to talk about this. In July, the Supreme Court was still RGB on it, had a case where they decided that the states that have faithless elector laws that punish or remove faithless electors, they unanimously ruled those rules are constitutional, and that now every state basically can remove or punish someone who votes against the party that sent them to the Electoral College. So now the faithless elector idea used to be a possibility, and now it seems like in this election it will no longer be a possibility. So if Trump wins Texas, let's say, all the or California, let's say Trump wins California, 55 electors will go and vote for him in January. They have to vote for him. They cannot vote for somebody else. They used to be able to vote for somebody else before the Supreme Court decision in July, but they unanimously ruled that you can't be a faithless elector anymore. So
hold on. So did the Supreme Court just uphold those laws, or did it
yes.
Did it basically apply the laws to the entire country?
So it says that the Supreme Court decision, however, is so strong that it would seem to allow states to remove faithless electors even without a state law. So the way that it was written was that it would apply to every state, which means that if a state who didn't have these laws had a faithless elector, they could probably still take them to the court and punish them for being a faithless elector. So it seems like that possibility is now
punish them, but that wouldn't necessarily mean remove them from the Electoral College.
I think that that's the reading that currently exists, is they could remove them from the Electoral College, replace them with a faithful elector. I think that's an interesting idea, but I don't think that's going to happen because of that. If that Supreme Court decision didn't happen, I think that would be an interesting possibility, especially in a close election where say it was like 270 to 268 or something like that.
Sure.
But I don't think that's a real possibility.
You think that's off the table now?
I think it is, but I mean, listen, I was right on one thing. I might be wrong on everything else for the rest of my life now. So,
so all right. So
wait, I got one. Can I give you a black swan? Can I give you a real?
Let's do another black swan. Sure.
Okay. So Supreme Court. Okay. So you can't do a faithless elector. There's a possibility, a 1% possibility that the Electoral College vote is 269 Biden, 269 Trump. Okay.
Sure.
The Constitution says that if no one reaches a majority of Electoral College votes, guess who gets to decide the president? It would be the House of Representatives, and Nancy Pelosi would decide who the president of the United States would be. And let me tell you, that is a black swan, because this country would be torn apart if old Nancy gets her big gavel out and slaps it down and says, I vote for Joe Biden. And that's the vote that throws
Hold on, Dr. Burge. Each state under that process gets a vote, right?
I think it's the House of Representatives votes as a whole. Everyone gets a vote. Is it each state gets one vote?
I think each state gets one vote under that.
Well, come on. That's still a crazy scenario, by the way.
But that is a crazy scenario. And as I recall, I think that basically they could propose whoever they wanted.
That's true. They could actually nominate someone from the floor, which would be even crazier in a lot of ways. But that actually happened in the election of 1800, I think. There's four candidates, and no one got over like 25%, and they had to go to mess. Like the whole thing was a debacle. And by the way, that's why you have parties, because we can consolidate the vote in two parties, so we don't get in a scenario where no one gets over that 50%, and we don't go through this the House of Representatives deciding, which is a mistake.
Absolutely.
So, parties are good. They're good.
Well, it definitely is an interesting year. We've had a lot of stuff happen. Everybody, there's all the social media stuff. People want to just get out of 2020, and we're almost there, folks. We're in, September, and we're into the Greek letters of the alphabet on the hurricanes. So, I mean, more fun things happening. Right as we interview, Tropical Storm Beta is bearing down on the Texas coast. Let's cover, I guess, anything else that you feel like you need to say about this election. Perhaps we'll talk before it, but just in case we don't, Dr. Burge, what else are you watching as we get close to November and this historic election between President Trump and Vice President Biden?
So I think it's the last polling I have is from the beginning of September 1st. I think that Trump's going to lose 5 points with white evangelicals. This is pre-RGB, okay? So, you got to keep all that, in the back of your mind. He did 80-20 with Clinton and white evangelicals in 2016. I think it might be 75-25, but here's where I think the big difference is. He won white Catholics 59-41 in 2016 against Hillary Clinton. I think it might be 53-47, 52-48, somewhere in there. That's the real key, because there's lots of Catholics all over these states that we're talking about. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, states that are kind of in flux. And I think they actually might be the difference in the election this time. And listen, most Catholics are actually in favor of abortion. I know the church has obviously a policy against abortion, but most Catholics do not follow a lot of those rules the Catholic Church has for them. So I think there's a real possibility that white Catholics might swing the election back in Biden's favor, and he might actually split that vote, which would be historic because Obama never did that. I think right now, if you look at all the polling, it's hard to see how Trump wins. He's just so far behind in so many states that he needs to win. That it just seems like, I mean, if he's within 2 or 3 or 4 points, that's inside the margin, and he can potentially make that up. But he's losing in states like, Wisconsin by 7 or 8 points, and Florida it's close, but things like Pennsylvania's down by like 7 or 8 points. It's hard to overcome 8-point deficits 4 times in a row. I just think that he's in a weaker position now than he was 4 years ago, and I think that Joe Biden's going to win. But there's just so much uncertainty. I will say this, and this is very important: you cannot trust the exit polls this time, because the exit polls are literally asking people as they exit the polling place. Mm-hmm. Remember, there might be as many as half of all votes cast not cast in person this time. So the people who go to the polls are not representative of everybody voting at that polling location or in that state or that country, the United States as a whole. So the exit polls this year are going to be very, very unreliable. You're going to have to wait for like actual polling, that's done in the more traditional way by phone or through the internet after the election. So just a big grain of salt when it comes to exit polls. Don't trust them. Don't trust them anyway because they're not that good, but especially don't trust them now. I think they're going to be really, really bad in 2020.
Do you think there will be any big surprises on the map?
I think that the possibility of like a big blue sweep is not remote. I think it's like 25-30% chance that they pick up a bunch of seats and it becomes 55-45, because it's right now it's 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. There's a real possibility it could be 52, 53, 54 Democrats and maybe 46 Republicans, especially if this Supreme Court thing kind of creates a headwind for a lot of Republicans who are in close races. I think there's a real possibility that these close races could all break towards the blue side, the Democratic side, in the last 6 weeks. I think that would be the big upset that's not that far out of possibility. I think that possibility is actually higher than Trump winning the general election. The Democrats have a big sweep all the way across.
Really? So you think that actually let me back up and frame this question.
Yep.
What I understand about political science is that usually the big anti-incumbent waves tend to be in the off-year elections. Is that fair, Dr. Burge? Like
tons of literature say that like the electorate gets mad and they want to kind of balance the houses out, so they vote for the opposite party in the midterm, which they did in 2018, which is exactly what you expect. But I think that's continuing. That will continue here.
You think it will continue and kind of break the trend a little bit? I mean, is it possible that President Trump wins and then loses the Senate?
I think that's very unlikely, to be honest with you. I think that might be the unlikeliest scenario of those 4 scenarios. I think that's the least likely of the 4. I think there's too many races where like Martha McSally's down by 8 and Susan Collins is down by 6, right? I think those are 2 races where you don't stand much a chance, really. There are other races. I think Gardner in Colorado is a really close race right now that he could easily lose. You can start going down the list. I just think that I actually think the chances of the Senate going blue are a little bit higher than Biden winning, or at least they're in that same category. I don't see a scenario where Trump is the president and both houses of Congress are controlled by the Democrats. I just think that's incredibly unlikely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that would make for an interesting 4 years, that's for sure. At least 2 years until the next election. I mean that would be a lot of stalling of legislation in that situation. I would
for
think.
Sure. Well, and Joni Ernst too, by the way. Joni Ernst is very close right now. It's on 55-45. I mean, there's so many elections that could go either way. Even in listen, there's a chance that Montana could elect 2 Democratic senators, John Tester and Steve Bullock. So, you never know. I mean, and again, the SCOTUS thing puts such a spin on these results that it might accelerate the Democrats and their electoral. They raised a whole bunch of money. I mean, a ton of money after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. I mean, it seems like the wave is pushing that direction. What happens between now and Election Day, I have no idea.
Okay. Time to really, truly prognosticate.
Yep.
Let's just take some percentages.
Yep.
Percentage likelihood that a nominee to
Yeah.
replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg is approved by the Republican Senate.
Oh man, 50-50. 50-50.
I think it's that unlikely that it would happen. 50-50.
Yeah, I do. And I think it's a timing thing more than a will thing. Like I said, I think the
because of the McSally race in Arizona.
Yes, I think because the McSally race, because especially if he comes out and says he won't confirm before before January, I think it becomes easily 50-50 because the McSally thing. But also, I think that Nancy will do whatever Nancy wants to do, and she will throw every roadblock she can into the process to slow the whole thing down. And as long as they get past that, November 30th deadline, then I think that the chances drop below 50-50 in that situation. So I think there's a lot of ways for this to go wrong, and only one way for it to go right for the Republicans. And I think the good money is that it takes too long and they run out the clock.
All right. Percentage likelihood that Donald Trump wins the election.
25, probably.
25%. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds higher than what you're saying, but
no, but I want to hedge a little bit,
Sure. Okay.
Like 2016 put, all of us in a bad spot, and I don't want to be in a bad spot again. I'll say this, where Hillary was up 4, Biden's up 7. And I think that's the difference, right?
So you mentioned last time we talked that you felt like the pollsters had improved since 2016.
I think they have. The state level polls have gotten a lot better for a bunch of boring reasons. But yes, I think Biden wins 75% of the time. Yes.
Okay. Likelihood that there is no president on Inauguration Day.
Oh gosh, less than 10%.
Okay. Likelihood that there's no president by Christmas.
25%.
All right.
Yeah.
End of November.
Probably 35%. Like I think there's a
pretty high percentage. I do think there's a real possibility.
I really do. But I do think there's a really good possibility that's over by the by the end of that week, by the end of election week, we'll know by Friday. I really think that's the most likely outcome.
And how likely do you think it is that either Biden or Trump wins in such a landslide that there is no contest at all? I mean, that there's no delay in the results.
25% chance that Biden wins in a landslide. 5% chance that Trump wins in a landslide. I just don't see it in the data. I think there's a decent chance that Biden wins in a landslide, which means that if he wins in a landslide, a lot of these Senate races are going to flip.
What's a Biden landslide? I mean, here in Texas, some polls have been close, but I mean, it seems hard to imagine a Democrat carrying Texas at this point in time. But
so it's Biden winning in all the places where it's 50-50 right now, right? So like Florida, Biden wins Florida. Biden wins Georgia or Texas. Okay, one or the other. Biden wins North Carolina. It's a blowout in Michigan. It's a blowout in Pennsylvania, right? Where it's like 5 points. If he wins by 5 points in either state, I'm going to be mind blown by that. If he wins by more than 3 or 4 points in Florida, to me that's a landslide. If you really sit back and think about it, we don't fully appreciate the Obama victory in 2008 for what it was. Obama won Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
State of Indiana in 2008. That's how.
I was looking at the map the other day. Mississippi was much closer than it would normally be because of the high African American turnout.
Exactly. So. I mean, Indiana is as solidly red as you get today.
Mm-hmm.
Trump won it by like 45 points, and in 12 years ago, 8 years before that, Obama won Indiana. Like that's how much he flipped the map. I don't think that Biden can ever flip the map like Obama did. But I think that he can move it back. I think he picks up places where Hillary doesn't. And I think that, listen, COVID has done no favors for Trump. And listen, Trump's done no favors for Trump in handling COVID. So I think 7 or 8 points. I think that Biden wins most of the time. And I think that he probably might win by a landslide. I think there's a non-zero chance.
Percentage likelihood that whether or not forgetting about the veracity of it, percentage likelihood that the president announces some sort of vaccine or cure for coronavirus before the election?
75%. Yeah, I do think
that's very likely.
Mm-hmm, but I think it's going to be very limited. Like maybe like 100,000 people will get it before election day.
Okay, but you think that's in the works? And you mentioned that before we talked as well.
Oh yeah, I really think so. But listen, I think the science is getting there. Like I think there's actually vaccine trials are actually going surprisingly well from everything I've read. And I do think we're going to have a vaccine, like a workable vaccine by the end of the year, and people will be vaccinated in large numbers by next Easter. I really think that's a real possibility.
A lot of since you watch the polls, I mean, it seems like a lot of Americans are saying they're not going to get a vaccine this time
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's a real worry that I have. And that's because we over politicize science. I think when it comes down to it, and I keep telling people, I tell people I'm going to get the vaccine. If I see an independent, group of scientists say I'm going to get the vaccine safe and effective, I'm going to get it. What people don't realize is you'd be lucky to be the 5 millionth person to get the vaccine, right? Because there's going to be so many people, you and that vaccine. The reality is, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a big surge at the beginning. Maybe 25, 30% of all Americans will get it. And then the number of COVID cases will go down because it'll kind of increase herd immunity a little bit. And then people will start realizing how it actually works and no one really gets sick. And then it'll go from 30% to 50%. And by the end of 2021, I think that we're probably approaching at least half of Americans have the vaccine, maybe 60%. And we're sort of back to normal by Christmas of 2021.
I wonder how they'll do that. I mean, maybe a lottery or something. How they'll give the vaccine to people. That'd be
That's
very
a good. I know there's a tiered system. Like they have a priority list, and like healthcare workers obviously are on the top of the list, and then it's going to go on to probably teachers and other community leaders and things like that. I don't know, but I do know that production is a serious problem. Like actually manufacturing,
right.
Because it takes 2 doses. So we're going to need like 500 million doses of vaccine to actually get everyone vaccinated in this country. And that might take, like I said, it might take over a year and a half to get all those doses produced, which is a
political science professors perhaps higher on the tier list than
I'll get it. I'm happy to get it. I mean, I love science. I believe in science. I trust science, and I'm happy to get a vaccine as long as independent scientists tell me it's safe and efficacious. I'm all for it.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, prognosticating on a couple of things we didn't talk about, but that I've been seeing discussed. How likely do you think it is that the current level of civil conflict broadens significantly into something that maybe not a civil war, but something that could easily be called like mass civil and social conflict, violence in major cities everywhere between different sides of the political spectrum, this kind of thing? It seems like a possibility, but how likely do you think that is?
I think wide scale insurrection, like including like millions of Americans, is very low. I think the angry people who will actually take up arms against the other side is actually really low, but they're really loud and really active on social media. So I think like there might be 100,000 people fighting each other in the streets of, Baltimore and DC and Los Angeles and Portland. I don't know, but I don't think the widespread, even during the height of the civil rights protests, there were not widespread protests across this country. Okay. I think the reality is that a lot of that's overblown. I think it's going to be a war without bullets being fired largely. I think if we do see a civil war, it's going to be fought, in the halls of power, at the ballot box, and hopefully not with arms. I think most Americans don't care enough, which is probably okay in this situation, to actually want to kill the other side. I just don't see that as a real possibility.
So Dr. Burge, you said that there's a 10% chance we don't have a president on Inauguration Day.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that create some massive civil issues? I mean, that would seem to be a spark that could create a wildfire.
I think so. I think potentially, yeah. I think there are people who are angry on both sides, but we have to remember the people who are really, really angry in America are very, very small, right? The people who are angry enough to take up arms to, protect or defend or assault this country, whatever you want to call it, I think is in the hundreds of thousands, not even in the millions. In a country of 330 million, I think we're talking about less than 1% of Americans would actually do that. If you look at most protests in America, the total number of people has actually never been that large as a percentage of all Americans. Even during the civil rights movement, most people were sort of on the sidelines, and very few actually ever got involved in any protests in any meaningful way. I think the challenge is that this is about democracy that affects all of us, not just African Americans in the South during the civil rights movement. But I still think that most Americans will say, hey, we're gonna solve this the way we always solve this, because we've kind of ingrained that in ourselves about how democracy works. And we don't shoot to solve our problems. We work through our problems with the system that we have. I think we might go through a touch and go period, but I think we'll come out on the other side, with a president and hopefully a functioning government. Maybe I'm being optimistic, but I think that's the most likely outcome.
Well, I think all Americans can hope that regardless of what specific position they hold, there's a peaceful transfer of power. There's, things keep going. I mean, America is one of the freest, most prosperous nations in human history, and you would hope that the good times keep rolling. Final question here.
Yep.
Let's just be make a point here. What is the percentage likelihood that polarization increases in this country going into next year and in the future?
I think it's more likely than the other direction. I think it's more likely that we'll see more polarization in a year than we'll see less polarization. But
you're not saying it's inevitable. I don't hear you saying
No. I don't think it is inevitable. And I think that maybe, and this is maybe me being optimistic, is that we'll see Donald Trump as sort of that polarization coming like the peak, right? The brunt of it was electing Donald Trump as president. Joe Biden is a Democrat. A lot of Republicans are going to hate him because he's a Democrat. I think he has an ability to unify the country more so than a lot of candidates on both sides because of his history, because of his personal history, but also his history of working across the aisle. I think that he might calm America, but here's the issue. There's a very good chance that he won't run for a second term because he'll be 82 years old at the end of his first term, which is unbelievable.
Wow.
And so the question is, who's after that, right? Who's the standard bearer on both sides of the aisle, right? Who's the next Republican in line? I think for the Democrats, there's a couple people on the bench: Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, Beto. I think Mayor Pete is a good option for them. I think the Republicans are going to be in a real inflection point. Are they going to nominate someone in the Trumpian, strain of the Republican Party, or are they going to go back to sort of an establishment Republican? I think that's a kind of real decision for the soul of the party, more so than the Democrats have to face. And I think that really will determine what polarization looks like in 5 or 10 years, is how the Republicans sort of navigate what they think their party should be in 5 or 10 years. I think the Democrats are going to continue to trend very slowly to the left like they have been for a long time. The Republicans could lurch back, lurch to the right, or it could actually trend back maybe more towards the center, depending on who the candidate is that they nominate in 2024.
Dr. Ryan Burge, political science professor, Eastern Illinois University. Always a pleasure to have you on. Now, you're working on a book and you write a lot and contribute. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. So I have a book coming out in March called The Nuns, N-O-N-E-S, where they came from, who they are, and where they're going, from Fortress Press, about 150 pages, 45 graphs, trying to kind of lay out the history of the religiously unaffiliated in America, trying to explain them and explain who they are. That's coming out in March. I write for a website called Religion in Public, religioninpublic.blog. I show up on Get Religion, Terry Mattingly's website. I also write for Christianity Today. I've had a piece post yesterday, and I also write for Religion News Service. You can find me at Ryan Burge on Twitter, RyanBurge, or ryanburge.net, where I post everything that I do, including all the papers that I've written. I have about 10 papers I'm going to publish this year, academic papers too. So I also do that side as well. So happy to have the conversation, Jess. It's always
you are a master of finding interesting backgrounds on Zoom. If anyone is watching the video version of this, you seem to be in a variety of interesting places, but they're just backgrounds.
Not my house is not nearly that interesting. It's a lot messier than this bookshelf. I'll just say that.
The most interesting bookshelf in the world is behind you, but it's not.
You got it.
Oh, the Zoom era. All right, Dr. Burge, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks, Jess.
And that was Dr. Ryan Burge, the third time he's been on our program, and always an interesting guest, very popular guest. If you like the program, please subscribe on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends, and if you have a guest idea, send me an email, jessfieldshow@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.